The silver diplomatic vessel of the Galactic Federation entered Earth's orbit on a warm June morning in 2087. It had been 30 years since humans had developed faster-than-light travel, and only 15 since they had established their first colony on Proxima Centauri b. The arrival of the alien ship marked humanity's official welcome into the wider galactic community. On the ground, Staff Sergeant Jack Miller watched the live feed with narrowed eyes. Unlike the cheering crowds gathered in major cities worldwide, Jack maintained the reserved watchfulness that had kept him alive through 3 tours during the Martian uprising. At 34, his face carried the weathered look of someone who had seen too much too young, but his posture remained military straight even in civilian clothes. "They're saying it's a new era of peace," said the bartender, nodding at the screen. Jack sipped his beer. "People always say that." 3 days later, Jack received the call. The newly formed Earth Diplomatic Corps needed military personnel for a cultural exchange program. Jack's name had been put forward specifically, his combat experience combined, with his graduate degree in xenobiology, made him an ideal candidate. "I'm not a diplomat," Jack told Colonel Harris during their meeting at the Washington, D.C. headquarters. "That's exactly why we want you," Harris replied, sliding a tablet across the desk. The Federation consists of 17 different species across 42 star systems. 3 main species form the leadership: the Navarans, the Exilians, and the Drovenians. Jack scrolled through the information. The Navarans were tall, slender beings with silver-blue skin and 4 arms, natural diplomats who founded the Federation. The Exilians resembled large arthropods with highly developed brains, the scientists and archivists of the galaxy. And the Drovenians, massive reptilian creatures with natural armor plating, served as the Federation's primary military force. The Drovenians have been fighting across 3 star systems for the past century, Harris explained. They've conquered 2 hostile species already. And they want to know if we'll be the 3rd, Jack concluded. Harris shook his head. "Actually, they don't see us as a threat at all. Initial reports suggest they find humans cute." Jack raised an eyebrow. "We need someone who understands combat but won't start an incident. You'll join 2 scientists on a 6-month exchange aboard their vessel, the Astral Harbinger." 1 week later, Jack stood in the shuttle bay of Andrews Spaceport alongside Dr. Olivia Grant and Dr. Daniel Fletcher. Olivia was a biologist specializing in comparative anatomy, while Daniel focused on cultural anthropology. Both scientists buzzed with excitement. "Can you believe we're going to be the first humans to live among multiple alien species?" Daniel said, adjusting his glasses. Olivia checked her medical kit for the 3rd time. "I hear their medical technology is centuries beyond ours. They can regrow limbs." Jack remained silent, his attention on the approaching Federation shuttle. Unlike his companions, he traveled light. 1 duffel bag containing essentials and a small wooden box with personal items. The shuttle landed with barely a sound. When the door opened, Ambassador Alara of the Navarans emerged. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, her 4 arms moved in graceful patterns as she welcomed them. Behind her came Professor Kiru, an Exilian whose body resembled a mantis with iridescent exoskeleton and compound eyes that reflected the humans like multiple mirrors. Last came General Vrex of the Drovenians. The massive reptilian alien stood, over 8 feet tall with natural armor plates across his body, and a face that seemed permanently set in a predatory grin. When he moved, muscles rippled beneath scales that had evolved to withstand energy weapons. "Welcome, representatives of Earth," Ambassador Alara said, her voice melodic despite the translation device. "We are honored to include your species in our exchange of knowledge." The 3 humans bowed slightly as they had been instructed. Jack noticed how General Vrex's eyes moved over them, lingering on their lack of natural defenses with what appeared to be amusement. The journey to the Astral Harbinger took less than 30 minutes. As they approached, the massive ship came into view. Nearly 5 miles long, it housed representatives from 12 different Federation species and served as a mobile diplomatic platform. "Your species has achieved much in a short time," Professor Kiru said, his mandibles clicking with what the translation device rendered as respect. Most species take thousands of years longer to develop space travel. Humans are remarkably adaptable, Olivia replied. Yes, General Vrex rumbled, though adaptation is sometimes a substitute for natural strength. Jack said nothing, but his eyes met the general's for a moment before the Dravenian chuckled and looked away. The astral harbinger proved even more impressive inside. Gravity adjusted automatically to each species' needs. The air composition shifted, in different sections. Even the lighting changed to accommodate various visual capabilities. During their first 2 weeks aboard, Daniel and Olivia shared human scientific knowledge and cultural artifacts with eager Federation scholars. They became minor celebrities, often surrounded by aliens curious about Earth. Jack, however, kept to himself. He observed the ship's security protocols, noted defense systems, and studied the crew dynamics. He spent hours in the ship's library, absorbing information about Federation species and their histories. Your military representative is unusually quiet, Ambassador Alara commented to Olivia during a cultural exchange dinner in their 3rd week aboard. Jack sees more than he says, Olivia replied diplomatically. Across the room, Jack stood near a viewport, watching stars streak by. General Vrex approached, accompanied by 2 Drovenian officers. Staff Sergeant Miller, Vrex said, his translation device barely keeping up with his rumbling voice. Your companions speak endlessly of human achievement, yet you say little of your military experience. There's not much to tell, Jack replied. One of the Drovenian officers snorted, a sound like rocks sliding together. We have studied your species' conflicts, small skirmishes over resources and territory. Nothing like the Great Cleansing Campaign in the Orion sector. Perhaps humans simply lack the appetite for true warfare, the other officer suggested. Jack took a sip from his glass. Perhaps. Your species is young, General Vrex said, not unkindly. In time, you may develop proper defenses. Until then, the Federation protects its members. Later that night, Jack found Olivia in the observation deck. They think we're harmless, he said. Olivia nodded. The Exilians classified us as physically unimposing but intellectually promising. They're fascinated by our art and literature, but dismiss our military as primitive. And the Drovenians? They call us the soft-skinned diplomats when they think we can't hear, Olivia sighed. They respect our technological progress but see us as essentially defenseless without it. Jack looked out at the stars. Maybe that's for the best. 1 month into their journey, the ship's alarms blared. All non-essential personnel were ordered to their quarters. Jack found Daniel in the corridor looking confused. What's happening? Daniel asked. The ship changed course suddenly, Jack explained. I'm going to find out why. Despite regulations restricting them from the command deck, Jack made his way there through service corridors he had memorized during his explorations. He arrived just as Ambassador Alara was addressing the assembled officers. The research outpost on Keltor 9 has sent a distress signal, she was saying. They report an attack by unknown forces. On the main view screen, a small moon orbiting a gas giant appeared. The outpost, a collection of domed structures, showed signs of damage. Several areas were burning. Scans detect approximately 43 Federation personnel still alive, an Exilian officer reported, and approximately 172 biological signatures matching the scourge. A murmur ran through the command deck. Jack had read about the scourge, a hive-minded species that consumed biological matter to expand their numbers. 3 Federation outposts had fallen to them in the past decade. We must mount a rescue operation immediately, Professor Kiru insisted. General Vrex shook his massive head. The Scourge have already established defensive positions. A direct assault would result in the deaths of all remaining personnel. Then, we negotiate, Ambassador Alara suggested. The Scourge do not negotiate, General Vrex replied. We should call for military reinforcements and prepare for a full-scale attack. As the arguing continued, Jack stepped forward. All eyes turned to the human who had somehow entered the restricted area. Perhaps, Ambassador Alara said, recovering quickly. Our human guest would like to share the Earth perspective on this situation. Jack looked at the tactical display, studied the outpost layout, and then turned to General Vrex. "I'd like access to your armory," he said simply, "and permission to lead a small team." The command deck fell silent. General Vrex's scales shifted in what Jack recognized as the Drovinian equivalent of laughter. "You wish to lead a rescue team?" The general's massive head tilted slightly. "Against the Scourge?" Ambassador Ilara stepped forward, her four hands moving in the graceful patterns that indicated diplomatic concern. "Staff Sergeant Miller, the Scourge are unlike any enemy your species has encountered. They operate with a hive mind and show no regard for self-preservation." Jack kept his eyes on the tactical display. "How long until Federation military reinforcements arrive?" Professor Kiru clicked his mandibles anxiously. 3 days minimum." "And how long will the survivors last?" Jack asked. The Exalian scientists exchanged glances. "The Scourge will begin harvesting biological material within hours," one admitted quietly. Jack nodded. "Then we don't have 3 days." General Vrex moved closer, towering over Jack. "You believe you can succeed where Drovinian assault teams have failed? With what strategy?" "A small team," Jack replied. 4 people, maximum. We go in quiet, extract the survivors, get out." Professor Kiru's compound eyes reflected Jack's image dozens of times. "Impossible. The Scourge have already established sensor nets around the outpost." "Then we need a distraction," Jack said. Olivia's voice came from behind them. She had followed Jack to the command deck. "The meteor shower," she said, pointing to the data on the tactical display. "Keltor 9 is passing through a debris field. We could use that as cover." General Vrex turned to his officers. "Would this work?" A Drovinian tactical officer studied the data. "Possibly. A small shuttle could approach alongside larger meteor fragments. But once on the surface, they would be detected immediately. Not if we approach from the thermal vent side," Jack said, highlighting a section on the display. "These readings show active geological features creating heat signatures that would mask our approach." Ambassador Ilara's expression showed surprise. "You've studied our sensor technology?" "I've been reading," Jack said simply. After 3 hours of debate, the plan was approved. Not because the Federation leaders believed it would work, but because they saw no better option. As one Exalian scientist put it, the human plan has a 5% chance of success. Doing nothing has 0. In the shuttle bay, Jack reviewed his small team. Olivia had volunteered immediately. "I didn't know you had combat training," Jack said as she checked her equipment. 4 years as an army medic before medical school," she replied. "I kept it off my official exchange profile, thought it might send the wrong message." 2 Exalians had also volunteered, scientist Terax and engineer Vril. Their exoskeletons provided natural protection, and their multiple limbs would be useful for carrying survivors. "The Scourge have never encountered humans," Terax explained. "They may not immediately recognize your species as a threat. This could provide a tactical advantage." Jack inspected the weapons General Vrex had reluctantly provided: stun batons, nerve disruptors, and 1 plasma rifle. "These are non-lethal," Jack noted, examining the stun baton. "Federation protocol requires minimal force for rescue operations," Vril explained. Jack looked at the tactical display one more time. "The Scourge don't follow Federation protocol." The shuttle launch was timed precisely with a heavy section of the meteor shower. As they descended toward Keltor 9, larger rocks surrounded them, masking their approach from sensors. Jack piloted manually, navigating between fragments with a skill that impressed even the Exalians. "Where did you learn to fly like this?" Vril asked, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "Mars," Jack replied. The uprising there involved a lot of debris fields. They landed in a narrow ravine near the thermal vents, half a mile from the outpost's rear entrance. Steam hissed around them as they exited the shuttle, the moon's thin atmosphere requiring them to wear breather masks but not full environmental suits. "The outpost's maintenance tunnels connect to this service entrance," Vril said, projecting a holographic map from his wrist device. "If we can reach it undetected, we can access all sections without using the main corridors." Jack nodded. Olivia, you and Terax take point. Your medical knowledge will help identify any survivors quickly. Vril and I will secure our exit path. They moved silently across the rocky terrain, using the steam vents as cover. Jack noticed how the Exelians moved. Despite their seemingly awkward bodies, they flowed across the landscape with surprising grace. Olivia moved with the disciplined quiet of someone who had done this before. The service entrance was unguarded but sealed from the inside. Vril extended two of his limbs, attaching small devices to the control panel. "The Scourge are not technologically advanced," he whispered. "They rely on biological adaptation rather than mechanical tools." The door slid open silently. Jack entered, first nerve disruptor ready. The maintenance tunnel was narrow and dark, lit only by emergency lighting. They moved in single file, following Vril's map toward the central research labs where most survivors had been detected. They encountered their first Scourge 20 minutes later. The creature resembled a pale, elongated humanoid with an exoskeleton that seemed to be growing around its body rather than being part of it. Its eyes, 6 small black orbs, swept the corridor as it patrolled. Jack signaled the others to freeze. The creature passed within feet of them but didn't look up to where they had pressed themselves against pipes on the ceiling. Once it passed, Jack lowered himself silently. "They can't sense us?" he whispered to Terax. "They primarily detect body heat and movement," the scientist replied. "The thermal signatures from the pipes likely masked us." They reached the central lab area to find it converted into a Scourge nest. Organic material, some of it clearly, once Federation technology, had been repurposed into pulsing web-like structures. Inside transparent sacs, Jack could see Federation personnel suspended in some kind of stasis. "They're preserving them," Olivia whispered, her face grim. "For later consumption," Terax scanned the room. 23 survivors here, still alive but sedated. "Can we move them?" Jack asked. "Not without alerting the entire hive," Vril responded. "The sacs are connected to the central nervous system of the hive mind." Jack studied the room layout. "We need a diversion. Something to draw the Scourge away while we extract the survivors." Terax pointed to a door on the far side. "The Xenobiology Containment Lab. It would contain specimens that might interest the Scourge more than these captured personnel." "Can you access it remotely?" Jack asked. Vril extended a limb toward a nearby console. "Possibly, but it would trigger alarms." "Good," Jack said. "We want alarms, just not here. Can you time it to go off in 5 minutes?" As Vril worked, Jack turned to Olivia. "How quickly can you get these people mobile?" "With Terax's help, maybe 30 seconds per person." She did the math. "About 12 minutes for all of them." "Too long," Jack said. "We need to prioritize. Who's most important to save first?" Terax scanned the captives. The lead researchers would have the most valuable information about the Scourge. They would be wearing blue identification markers. Jack nodded. "We get them first, then as many others as we can before our exit window closes." The plan worked initially. When the alarms triggered in the xenobiology lab, most of the Scourge rushed toward the disturbance. Jack and his team quickly cut down 6 stasis sacs containing the lead researchers. Olivia administered stimulants to revive them while Terax kept watch. But as they prepared to extract more survivors, a high-pitched wail echoed through the facility. "They've discovered the deception," Vril warned. "We have approximately 3 minutes before they return." Jack made a quick decision. Change of plans. We move now with who we have. As they rushed back toward the maintenance tunnels, the revived scientists stumbling along between them, Jack could hear the Scourge returning. The sound of their movement, like thousands of insect legs on metal, echoed through the corridors. "They're cutting us off from the service entrance," Terax said, checking his scanner. Jack looked at the facility map on Vril's projector. "There," he pointed. "Environmental control room. It connects to the external atmosphere processors." They changed direction, half dragging the still groggy scientists. Just as they reached the environmental control room, the first wave of Scourge rounded the corner behind them. Jack fired the plasma rifle, bringing down part of the ceiling to slow the pursuit. Inside the control room, he quickly assessed their options. "The atmosphere processors," he said to Vril. "Can you set them to overclock?" The Exilian's eyes widened. "That would cause an explosive decompression of this entire section." Jack nodded. "Exactly, but we need a way out first." He looked up at the maintenance shaft above the main console. It was their only chance now. Jack pointed to the narrow maintenance shaft above them. "That leads to the external vents. If we can reach it, we can get to the surface and signal for extraction." The sounds of Scourge breaking through the barricade grew louder. They had minutes, at most. "The shaft is too narrow for us," Vril observed, his exoskeleton clicking as he studied the opening. "For you, maybe," Jack said. He turned to one of the rescued scientists, a thin Navaran woman. "Can you climb?" She nodded weakly. Jack turned to Olivia. "Get them up there. I'll set the processors to overload." Olivia's eyes widened. "You can't stay behind." "Someone has to manually override the safety protocols," Jack replied calmly. He looked at Vril. "How long after activation until detonation?" 60 seconds, the Exilian replied. Jack nodded. "Plenty of time." Terax and Olivia quickly created a makeshift lift system using their belts and equipment straps. They began hoisting the rescued scientists up the shaft, while Vril assisted Jack at the main control panel. "The sequence requires 3 separate authorizations," Vril explained. Jack studied the panel. "Can we bypass them?" Vril hesitated, then extended 3 of his limbs simultaneously to different parts of the control system. These primary junctions, if overloaded together, should trigger the emergency purge sequence. The first of the Scourge broke through the door. Without hesitation, Jack fired the plasma rifle, vaporizing the creature. More pushed in behind it. "Go!" Jack shouted to Vril. "Get up the shaft." The Exilian engineer moved with surprising speed, his multiple limbs allowing him to climb. Rapidly, Terax followed, helping pull up the last of the rescued scientists. Olivia remained, firing her nerve disruptor at the advancing Scourge. The weapon slowed them, but didn't stop them. "Olivia, go now," Jack ordered as he connected power cables directly to the junction points Vril had indicated. "Not without you," she replied, continuing to fire. The control panel sparked as the power surge overrode the safety systems. Warning alarms blared throughout the facility. A mechanical voice announced, "Atmospheric processors critical. Purge sequence initiated. 60 seconds to decompression." Jack grabbed Olivia's arm. "Time to leave." They retreated to the shaft as more Scourge poured into the room. Jack boosted Olivia up first, then jumped to catch the edge of the opening. A Scourge grabbed his leg, its claw-like fingers digging into his calf. Jack kicked hard, dislodging the creature, and pulled himself into the shaft. The maintenance tunnel was tight and dark. They crawled upward as fast as possible, hearing the mechanical countdown continue through the station's communication system. 30 seconds to decompression. The shaft seemed endless. Jack's lungs burned from the exertion, the thin atmosphere of Keltor 9 making each breath a struggle even through the breather mask. 20 seconds to decompression. They could see light above them, the external vent cover. Terax and Vril had already removed it and were helping the scientists out onto the moon's surface. 10 seconds to decompression. Jack pushed Olivia ahead of him, practically shoving her through the opening. He pulled himself out just as the countdown reached 0. The explosion wasn't like anything on Earth. In the thin atmosphere of Keltor 9, there was no dramatic fireball. Instead, a visible shockwave rippled across the facility as all atmosphere inside was violently expelled. The structure buckled, sections collapsing inward from the sudden pressure change. The Scourge caught outside were thrown into the air, their bodies failing as they tried to adapt to the abrupt decompression. Those inside were crushed or suffocated. Instantly, Jack activated his emergency beacon. "We need immediate extraction," he said into his communicator. Within minutes, a Federation shuttle appeared, hovering over their position. It was not the small craft they had arrived in, but a larger Drovenian military transport. Once aboard, medical personnel immediately attended to the rescued scientists. Jack sat heavily on a bench, allowing Olivia to check his injured leg. "That was some rescue," she said quietly as she applied a medical seal to the wound. Jack didn't respond, his eyes on the viewport as they pulled away from the devastated outpost. The explosion had destroyed nearly half the facility. Back on the Astral Harbinger, the mood was mixed. The rescue of 6 scientists was celebrated as a miracle, but the loss of the outpost and the other trapped personnel weighed heavily. In the medical bay, Jack sat silently as a Navaran doctor treated his leg. General Vrex entered, his massive frame filling the doorway. "Staff Sergeant Miller," the Drovenian's voice rumbled. "Your team succeeded against impressive odds." Jack nodded once. "However," Vrex continued, "the destruction of a Federation research facility is concerning." Ambassador Alara swept into the room, her forearms moving in agitated patterns. "General, the humans saved 6 of our most valuable researchers. The facility was already lost." "But the method," Vrex insisted, "intentional explosive decompression, is not a standard Federation rescue protocol." Jack looked up at the towering reptilian. "There are no standard protocols for the Scourge." Professor Kiru entered, followed by the rescued scientists. "The human is correct, General, and there is more." The Exilian gestured to one of the Navaran scientists. "Dr. Lennis, please tell them what you told me." The thin Navaran woman stepped forward. "The Scourge were experimenting on us. They were not just consuming, they were learning, adapting their biology to understand ours." A chill silence fell over the room. "If we had not been rescued," another scientist added, "they would have gained knowledge of our neurological systems, perhaps even accessed our memories." General Vrex's scales shifted. "And the outpost?" "The destruction was necessary," Dr. Lennis said firmly. "It prevented the Scourge from obtaining critical Federation research. Staff Sergeant Miller made the correct decision." Later, in the ship's observation lounge, Jack stood alone watching the stars. The door hissed open behind him and Ambassador Alara entered. "Staff Sergeant," she said, her melodic voice soft. "The Federation Council wishes to formally thank you for your actions today." Jack nodded. "However," she continued, "there are questions." "About the explosion?" Jack guessed. "Yes." Alara moved to stand beside him. "The tactical approach you employed was unlike anything in Federation military doctrine. General Vrex has requested a full briefing on human combat strategies." Jack turned to face her. "I just did what was necessary to get everyone out alive." "That is precisely what interests us," Alara replied. "You made a decision in seconds that our tactical experts would have debated for hours. You were willing to sacrifice a valuable research facility without hesitation. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a position to save the people," Jack said. "And sometimes," Alara observed, "you must sacrifice people to secure a victory." "Is that not also human military thinking?" Jack's expression darkened. "We try to avoid that. But it has happened," Alara pressed. "Your species fights differently than any in the Federation. The Drovenians rely on strength and natural armor. The Exilians use technology and numbers. But humans—" She paused. "Humans appear to rely on what you call tactical flexibility, on being willing to do what others would not consider." Jack looked back out at the stars. "We do what we must to survive." "The Federation Council has called an emergency session," Alara said. "They wish to understand more about human warfare, especially in light of today's events." Jack sighed. "I'm a soldier, not a teacher." "Nevertheless," Alara replied, "you have shown us something today that none can ignore. The question now is what it means for humanity's place in the Federation." As she left, Jack remained at the viewport. He had seen the way General Vrex looked at him after the mission, not with the dismissive amusement of before, but with something new. Something like caution. Jack knew that look. He had seen it before, in the eyes of enemies who had underestimated humans until it was too late. The Federation Council chamber aboard the Astral Harbinger was designed to accommodate all 17 species, that made up the Galactic Alliance. Seats and standing platforms of various shapes and sizes surrounded a central holographic display area. Today, that display showed detailed images of the destroyed research outpost on Keltor 9. Jack stood at attention in the center of the chamber. He wore his formal Marine uniform, which had been stored in his personal effects for just such occasions. Beside him stood Olivia, also in her Army dress uniform. Staff Sergeant Jack Miller, Ambassador Alara began, her forearms positioned in a formal greeting stance. You have been called before this council to explain human military tactics and strategy. Jack nodded once. General Vrex moved forward, his massive scaled body casting a shadow over Jack. The destruction of the Keltor 9 facility, while effective, represents an approach unknown in Federation military doctrine. We wish to understand the reasoning behind such destructive methods. It was a tactical decision based on available options, Jack replied simply. Professor Kiru clicked his mandibles. Yet you made this decision in seconds, without consultation or committee review. In combat situations, there isn't time for committee review, Jack said. The council members exchanged glances. A Dravenian officer displayed tactical simulations on the holographic projector. Our analysis suggests 17 different extraction options that would not have resulted in facility destruction, the officer stated. Jack studied the simulations briefly. Those options assume ideal conditions and standard enemy behavior. The Scourge don't behave according to standard patterns. Ambassador Alara leaned forward. Staff Sergeant Miller, what we are trying to understand is not just this single incident, but the broader implications of human military thought. Your species lacks natural defenses. You have no claws, no armor, limited strength compared to many species. Yet your approach to conflict seems uniquely effective. Jack shifted uncomfortably. This was becoming more than a debriefing. Perhaps, Olivia suggested, it would help to explain how human military strategy evolved on Earth. The council members turned their attention to her. Dr. Grant, Ambassador Alara acknowledged, you were also part of this mission. Please, share your perspective. Olivia nodded. Humans evolved as pursuit predators without significant natural weapons. We couldn't outfight most predators, so we had to outthink them. Our military history reflects this approach. General Vrex made a dismissive gesture. All species develop military tactics based on their physical capabilities. True, Olivia agreed. But humans took a different path. Without natural weapons, we created artificial ones. Without natural armor, we developed strategies that didn't require it. And these strategies, Professor Kiru inquired, they include deliberate environmental manipulation as you demonstrated on Keltor 9? Jack and Olivia exchanged glances. Sometimes, Jack admitted. When necessary. A Navaran counselor spoke up. Our research into Earth history indicates your species has rules for warfare. The Geneva Conventions, correct? Why would rules be necessary if not to constrain natural tendencies? The question hung in the air. Jack felt a weight settling in his stomach. This was the conversation he had hoped to avoid. Rules became necessary, he said carefully, because history showed us what we were capable of without them. The chamber fell silent. Ambassador Alara's expression showed concern. What exactly does that mean, Staff Sergeant? Jack took a deep breath. Human history includes periods of conflict where our lack of natural weapons led us to develop increasingly destructive artificial ones. The rules were created to place limits on what weapons and tactics could be used, even in times of war. These weapons, General Vrex asked, they were more destructive than natural biological capabilities? Far more, Jack replied quietly. Professor Kiru activated a data display. Our records show that humans have developed projectile weapons, explosive devices, and basic energy weapons. These seem comparable to standard Federation armaments. Jack shook his head slightly. Those are our current standard weapons. Throughout our history, we've created others. What kinds of weapons? General Vrex pressed. Jack looked to Olivia, who nodded encouragingly. Chemical weapons that could kill thousands in minutes. Jack began, his voice steady. Biological agents, engineered to cause specific diseases, nuclear weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single moment. The council chamber erupted in murmurs and the equivalent of gasps from various species. Impossible, a Dravenian officer growled. A species would not develop weapons that could potentially destroy themselves. We did, Jack said simply, and we used them. The holographic display shifted to show historical images from Earth, scenes from the chemical warfare of World War I, the aftermath of Hiroshima, and other dark moments from human conflict. Ambassador Alara's 4 hands moved in patterns, indicating distress. These images, they show deliberate attacks on civilian populations. Yes, Jack acknowledged grimly, what we now call war crimes. War crimes? General Vrex repeated the unfamiliar term. Actions in warfare that violate our agreed-upon rules, Olivia explained. Attacking civilians, using prohibited weapons, torture, executing prisoners. You needed rules specifically forbidding these actions? Professor Kiru asked, his compound eyes reflecting Jack's image dozens of times. Jack met the Exilian's gaze. We needed rules because history proved we would do these things without them. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. In the Federation, Ambassador Alara finally said, warfare follows natural evolutionary patterns. Species fight as their biology dictates. The concept of exceeding natural limitations to cause intentional mass destruction is difficult to comprehend. Humans had to find ways to survive against stronger predators, Jack explained. We became efficient. Where other species evolved natural weapons, we created artificial ones. Where you have territorial instincts, we developed strategic thinking designed to overcome those instincts. Olivia stepped forward. Our medical science advanced primarily through warfare. Trauma medicine, psychology, even space medicine, all developed largely from the need to keep soldiers fighting or return them to battle. General Vrex moved closer to Jack, studying him with new eyes. You destroyed half a research facility to eliminate an enemy force and executed this plan in minutes. Was this typical human warfare? No, Jack said. In human terms, that was a surgical operation with minimal collateral damage. The general's scales shifted in what Jack now recognized as discomfort, and what would constitute maximum damage. In human terms, Professor Kiru asked hesitantly. Jack looked at the holographic display, still showing images from Earth's wars. There were times in our history when entire cities were destroyed to break an enemy's will to fight, when civilian populations were targeted specifically to force surrender, when new weapons were developed not just to win battles, but to make the enemy fear the very concept of continuing the war. Ambassador Alara's voice was quiet. And this is why humans created rules for warfare? To prevent such actions? Jack nodded. We recognized what we were capable of, so we created limits. And you follow these limits? General Vrex asked. We try, Jack replied honestly. Most of the time, we succeed. The council fell silent again, each member processing this new understanding of their supposedly harmless allies. Ambassador Alara finally spoke. I believe we have much to consider regarding humanity's place in the Federation. This session is adjourned for now. As the council members filed out, many cast long looks at the 2 humans. Jack noticed General Vrex conferring urgently with his officers, occasionally glancing back. That went well, Olivia murmured sarcastically. Jack sighed. They needed to know eventually. Yes, she agreed, but now they'll look at all humans differently. Jack watched as the last of the council members left the chamber. Maybe that's not entirely bad. Underestimating someone can be dangerous, for everyone involved. In the days following the council meeting, Jack noticed a distinct change in how the Federation crew treated the humans aboard the Astral Harbinger. The Drovenians, once dismissive, now maintained a respectful distance. The Navarans seemed eager to engage in more detailed discussions about human culture and history. The Exilians had begun an extensive study of Earth's military conflicts. Jack sat alone in the ship's recreation area, watching the stars through the large viewport. The door opened, and Daniel entered, looking troubled. "There you are," Daniel said, sitting across from Jack. "Everyone's talking about your council appearance." Jack sighed. "I just told them the truth." "The truth has consequences," Daniel replied. "Ambassador Alara asked me detailed questions about the world wars, nuclear proliferation, and the resource conflicts. The Exilians have requested access to our historical archives." "And the Drovenians?" Jack asked. Daniel smiled grimly. "General Vrex has been oddly quiet. His officers have been running combat simulations, including human tactics." Before they could discuss further, the ship's alert system activated. The calm voice of the ship's AI announced, "All senior personnel report to the command deck. Scourge vessels detected in Sector 7. Jack and Daniel exchanged glances before hurrying to the command deck. They weren't technically senior personnel, but after recent events, no one stopped them. The command deck was already crowded when they arrived. Ambassador Alara stood with the Federation Council members, watching the main display. General Vrex and his officers studied tactical projections. 3 Scourge hive ships have entered the Proxima Centauri system, Professor Kiru was explaining. They appear to be heading toward the human colony on Proxima B. Jack felt his blood run cold. Earth's only extrasolar colony housed over 10,000 people. Ambassador Alara noticed Jack and motioned him forward. "Staff Sergeant Miller, your expertise may be valuable here." Jack studied the tactical display. 3 massive Scourge vessels moved toward Proxima B. Federation ships were responding, but they were hours away at best. "The colony's defenses?" Jack asked. "Minimal," Daniel answered. "It's primarily a research and mining operation. They have some defensive capabilities, but nothing designed to repel a full Scourge assault." General Vrex turned to Jack. "The Federation fleet can intercept in approximately 7 hours. The Scourge will reach the colony in 5. Jack examined the display more closely. "The colony is built inside the mountain range on the northern continent, correct?" Daniel nodded. "For protection against solar radiation." Jack zoomed in on the planetary display. "What's this facility here, 20 miles from the main colony?" "The atmospheric processors," Daniel replied. "They're terraforming the planet's surface gradually." Jack turned to General Vrex. "Can we contact the colony directly?" The general nodded to a communications officer who opened a channel. The face of a middle-aged woman appeared on screen. "This is Dr. Karen Boyd, Colony Administrator. We've detected the approaching vessels. Federation, please tell me you have ships on the way." "We do," Ambassador Alara assured her, "but they may not arrive before the Scourge." Jack stepped forward. "Dr. Boyd, this is Staff Sergeant Jack Miller, Earth Marine Corps. I need to speak with your security chief immediately." Dr. Boyd's eyes widened slightly at Jack's uniform, but she nodded and transferred the call. A moment later, a man with a weathered face appeared. "Chief Alan Rivera, Colony Security. Who am I speaking with?" "Staff Sergeant Jack Miller. You have Scourge vessels inbound. What's your defensive capability?" Chief Rivera grimaced. "Limited. We have perimeter defenses designed for local predators, not space invaders. Some small arms, a few heavy weapons. Nothing that will stop those ships." Jack nodded. "I understand. Listen carefully. You need to evacuate everyone from the main colony to the emergency bunkers in the southern range immediately." "Those bunkers can't hold everyone," Rivera protested. "They don't need to," Jack replied. "Not for long. You also need to send a small team to the atmospheric processing facility with all the mining explosives you have." General Vrex and Ambassador Alara exchanged concerned glances. "Staff Sergeant," Alara began. "What are you proposing?" Jack turned to the council. "The same strategy we used on Keltor 9, but on a larger scale. The atmospheric processors on Proxima B are more powerful and contain significant amounts of compressed gases." Understanding dawned on Professor Kiru's face. "You intend to create a massive explosive decompression event?" "Yes," Jack confirmed, "but controlled, directed at the Scourge ships when they land." "And the colony?" General Vrex asked. "The mountain range will shield the emergency bunkers from the blast," Jack explained. but everyone in the main colony needs to evacuate now. Ambassador Alara stepped closer. This would cause significant damage to the terraforming project. Years of work would be lost. Better to lose the project than the colonists, Jack replied firmly. After a moment of tense silence, Alara nodded. Proceed. The next 4 hours were a blur of activity. Jack coordinated with Chief Rivera on the evacuation, while Olivia, who had joined them, worked with Daniel to calculate the explosion's potential radius. The Federation Council monitored the approaching Scourge vessels with growing concern. "They're entering the atmosphere," General Vrex announced as the ships began their descent. On the screen, Chief Rivera confirmed. "Evacuation complete. All colonists are in the emergency bunkers or the southern outposts. The explosive team is in position at the processing facility." Jack studied the descent trajectory of the Scourge ships. "They're landing exactly where we predicted, around the main colony." "The atmospheric processors are ready," Rivera reported. "Waiting for your signal." Jack watched as the Scourge ships landed. Small figures began to emerge, hundreds of Scourge. Drones moving toward the seemingly abandoned colony. "Now," Jack ordered. On the planet's surface, the explosive team triggered the detonation sequence. The atmospheric processors erupted in a massive explosion, releasing tons of compressed gases. In a directed blast, the shockwave ripped across the plane toward the landed Scourge vessels. The command deck watched in stunned silence as the explosion engulfed the area around the colony. The Scourge ships, caught in the blast, were thrown onto their sides by the force. Thousands of Scourge drones were simply swept away. When the dust settled, 2 of the 3 Scourge ships lay destroyed. The third was severely damaged but attempting to lift off. Federation vessels will intercept the remaining ship before it can escape, General Vrex announced. As the crisis subsided, Jack felt the eyes of the Federation Council upon him. Once again, Ambassador Alara said quietly, "Humanity's approach proves both effective and concerning." General Vrex approached. "Jack, the colony was saved, but at great cost to the terraforming project. We can rebuild machinery," Jack replied. "We can't replace people." The Drovenian general studied Jack for a long moment. "My species evolved as apex predators. We conquered through superior strength and natural weapons. But humans..." He paused. "Humans evolved to outsmart larger predators, and that makes you more dangerous than any naturally evolved warrior species." Later, as the Astral Harbinger headed to Proxima B to assist with recovery efforts, Jack stood in the observation lounge with Ambassador Ilara. "The Federation Council has been in session for hours, discussing humanity's place in the galactic community," she told him. "And their conclusion?" Jack asked. "That we underestimated your species," she replied. "We saw your physical limitations and assumed you were naturally peaceful. We failed to understand that those very limitations drove you to develop alternatives that are in many ways more frightening than claws or armor." Jack turned to face her. "Does this change humanity's standing in the Federation?" Ilara's 4 hands moved in a complex pattern Jack had not seen before. "It changes everything, Staff Sergeant. The Federation must now decide whether to embrace humanity as full partners or consider other options." "Other options?" Jack asked, though he understood her meaning. "Some council members fear what humanity might become if given access to advanced Federation technology," she admitted. "Others argue that having humans as allies is preferable to any alternative." Jack looked out at the stars. "We've fought ourselves more than anyone else. The rules we created, the laws against war crimes, they came from seeing our own worst potential. And that," Ilara said softly, "is what gives many of us hope. You recognized your capacity for destruction and chose to limit it. That choice may be humanity's greatest strength." As the ship continued toward Proxima B, Jack wondered what would come next. Humanity had revealed its nature to the galaxy, not as the harmless, gentle creatures the Federation had first assumed, but as something far more complex. Something that had faced its own darkness and chosen to create rules against it. Whether The galaxy would see that as wisdom or weakness remained to be seen.